now, your hosts, Vicki Hyman and Erin Medley.
Hey everyone, welcome to Remote Possibilities, the TV podcast. I am Erin Medley alongside Vicki Hyman. Hi Vicki.
Hey.
Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Remote Podcast, at Vicki Hy, VICKIHY, and at E_meds. Vicki, it is the day after Election Day.
Oh, is it now? Wink, wink.
Too bad we can't talk about the winner, but I'm sure the country is turning to other things like watching Survivor tonight.
Or finishing their bunker.
Or, yeah, whatever. One of those two things is happening.
Either side.
Either side. I just think we're all glad that this is over. Right?
Yes, I'm glad this is over in 24 hours. Okay.
And now we can get back to our regular TV watching. I will say that last week, the NBC lineup on, I think it was Wednesday night, I was so confused. I was like, where's my Law & Order SVU? Where's my, whatever comes on after that, one of my Chicagos? And it's because the World Series was on.
Oh, yes, that thing.
And the seventh game of the World Series, and like NBC made some last-minute programming decision where they didn't show any new episodes, and it was all reruns.
It was very confusing.
It was extremely confusing, especially because Law & Order SVU was on during the time the Blacklist was supposed to be on, but the DVR still said the Blacklist. And I was just like, I can't with the World Series. Go Cubs. All right, let's get to some TV news. In some Stranger Things news, they're back to shooting season 2.
Thank God.
Really?
Yes, you know I'm excited about this. You know I have faith in these people.
I think everyone is very excited about season 2.
You were not. You were like, just end it now.
Well, I think that if they had ended it, I would have been fine with that. I'm happy it's coming back, but they either should have ended it or it should have been an anthology series with a new story.
I could get behind anthology or far in the future or in the past.
Right, but I think they're just continuing where we left off.
I'm cool with that.
We have some casting news for season 2 of Stranger Things. Paul Reiser of Mad About You fame, and I'm sure many other things.
And Red Oaks, which is the New Jersey set 80s comedy.
On
which,
Amazon.
Premieres its second season on Friday.
Oh, okay. So Paul Reiser's joining the cast, as well as Sean Astin. Talk about bringing the 80s nostalgia back. I mean, Sean Astin, who was in The Goonies, right? Right?
Yes, he was.
Oh, okay. So I was like, wait a minute.
I was thinking about Rudy, though.
Well, yeah, but he was in The Goonies, and that's this TV show is very reminiscent of that cult classic 80s movie that I love oh so much. So also joining the series is Danish actress Linnea Bertelsen. And she will play Roman, an emotionally damaged, magnetic young woman who suffered a great loss as a child. That's according to TV Line.
And Sean Astin is going to be playing Bob Newsby, a kind-hearted former nerd who went to high school with Joyce and Hopper. And he now manages the local Hawkins Radio Shack. And as much as I was sort of rooting, for a Hawkins, Winona Ryder's character's name was, I forget.
You just read it.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, Joyce, thank you. I was sort of rooting for a romance only because I like romances and I love
Oh, so we think that's where this
Hopper.
Is going?
No, I want to see Sean Astin and Winona Ryder get together. That would make me happy.
Oh, I'm sure that's where it's going. And then Paul Reiser is going to play Dr. Owens, who's a high-ranking member with the Department of Energy, and he's on the cleanup assignment after the goings-on of last year. So, all right, we'll see. Season 2 of Stranger Things. Is there an official release date, or we don't know yet? Sometime in the future.
Yeah, sometime in the future. I think next year.
But we do know it'll be 9 episodes, which is great because that was one of the things that we both said. They don't need to go overboard with extra episodes because it's now popular. In other TV news, David O. Russell has signed a deal with Amazon for $160 million, 2-season order for a drama starring Robert De Niro and Julianne Moore.
Well, that explains like 100 of the million. Well, okay, 20 of the million.
Well, I mean, between Robert De Niro, Julianne Moore, and David O. Russell, yeah, that's probably like at least 60 of them.
What's it going to be about?
I don't know.
Just
it's a drama
Here's
about
a blank
something.
Check David O. Russell.
Make us famous, more famous.
Make us more famous.
Make us, because Amazon has Transparent, right?
Amazon does have Transparent. It also, I think, gambled on the Woody Allen project recently, and it's pretty much failed
Yeah.
on it. Not good.
Wait, it's already up on Amazon?
Oh, yeah. Like a month ago.
What is it called?
I can't remember what it's called, but it is set in the 60s. He plays a curmudgeon, and he's married to Elaine May, who I happen to like a lot, and they have a run-in with a hippie who, played by Miley Cyrus, who upends their expectations.
How have I never heard of this show?
Oh my God, I wrote about it.
You did?
I did.
Well, then that's clearly how I've never heard of it, because I don't read what you write. Yes. All right. Well, maybe I'll check that out. And
Don't.
No, but now I want to know I want to see for myself.
Don't.
How terrible it is.
Do not wait. I'm always I feel like my entire job is telling you not to waste your time.
I know, but then I like to see for myself. I'm one of those TV watchers. I'll check out an episode. In other TV news, my favorite TV news, we have Big Bang Theory news.
It's your favorite show?
It is my every week. Cannot wait.
You have a poster of Jim Parsons right here in your office.
Every time he wins an Emmy, I cry.
Like 7 times already.
Oh, it's so many times. CBS is considering a prequel spinoff for The Big Bang Theory.
Starring
who knows yet? Yes, the lead character will be Sheldon, not played by Jim Parsons, but he will executive produce the show.
Actor.
He's not going to get his 8th Emmy with
Actually,
this
I think he
role.
only has like 2 or 3.
No, doesn't he have? He's been nominated.
Yes,
but he wasn't nominated this past year.
No,
that was like the big controversy. So for all of those of you out there who love The Big Bang Theory so much, you'll be able to watch it twice a week.
It's not as bad as you think it is.
I know. I've seen it. It's
a
not
decent ensemble
horrible
comedy.
It's not horrible. But I still don't get it. It's like Two Broke Girls. Remember when I told you I was stuck on my cruise and that was all I could watch was Two Broke Girls?
I can't get behind that.
I just don't understand what's happening.
I guess it'd be a 90s set comedy then?
Right, because it's when he was younger.
Yeah.
And they're in the present day on the show now. I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, he's growing up in Texas. So that's a different element too. All right, Vicki, speaking of shows that people love, you have been watching something on Netflix called The Crown.
Yes.
To fill all of your Downton Abbey
Oh, so much more than Downton Abbey.
I
mean, like, you remember the first season of Downton Abbey when you still thought it was, like, classy?
Yeah.
And it wasn't a soap opera that was absolutely ridiculous?
Yeah.
It's like that.
Okay, tell us about it. What is the show about?
So the show is about the early days of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. So it's set in the 1950s. It stars Claire Foy as the young Elizabeth. Jared Harris plays her father. And the ongoing storyline, for those of you who love the King's Speech, is about he was the younger brother who was forced to become king when his older brother abdicated to marry this divorcee that was gonna, like, apparently, like, breaking, you know, be the worst thing that ever happened to Great Britain. So he took over. It's about duty and responsibility, and it is such a beautiful change from political candidates who will say and do absolutely anything, because this is about people who have to sort of subsume themselves to the role of the monarch. And you see it in Elizabeth. You see it with her husband, Prince Philip, who's played by Matt Smith of Doctor Who. Prince Philip comes into this marriage, and he knows that, you know, he's going to be sort of playing second fiddle, but doesn't realize quite how much his life is going to change by marrying the soon-to-be. I mean, when he marries her, you know, the idea that she's going to be queen one day is pretty distant, but her father dies, you know, I think the second episode. No spoilers there.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, it is so beautifully made. I mean, there's so much money in this show. I could just watch the visuals. It just absolutely transports me to this time and place. The writing is beautiful. It's from the man who wrote The Queen. He's also did Frost Nixon, a bunch of stuff that has to do with the royal family. And it is my escape. It is wonderful. I'm 5 episodes in, and I don't want to binge it. One of the good things about this show is that every episode is sort of built around an event, and so it's not like, you know, what's going to happen next? I have to blow through every single episode right now. I'm taking my time a little bit. It's like 1 episode a day.
How many episodes are there?
Oh, I think it's either 8 or 10. I think it's 10.
So you're about halfway through.
It's wonderful.
Okay, so that's Vicki's show that she recommends you all check out. We're going to try to do this every week. We'll bring something new to the table. I can tell you now that when I bring the Bad Girls Club or something lowbrow, I don't want to hear anything, okay? Because I watch a lot of stuff. Vicki, we have to
talk about
the Real Housewives of New Jersey reunion.
Oh, do we?
Absolutely. Look, we don't have to go deep.
Okay.
But we got to give some. It wasn't deep. We have to give some high level thoughts here.
Okay.
I think our listeners require us to do so. What did you think?
I kind of enjoyed it. I have to say, if only for the completely flabbergasted looks by every single person, including her brother Joe, when Teresa blamed Jacqueline and Caroline Manzo for diming her out to
What's
the
that
feds.
phone number? 1-888 call the FBI. Like
call
what?
The
like how
call
does
the IRS?
even,
I don't know.
Who does this?
It was it's just the most ridiculous thing ever. It reminds me of certain presidential candidates, just sort of like
former presidential candidates
throwing stuff out there, seeing what sticks. This is not going to stick, people.
No, it's not. No one believes that nonsense. I mean, there were so many things. This finale, and I'm a Jacqueline defender most of the time, and I will say Jacqueline came off really well. I mean, in this
considering
reunion,
how crazy she has been,
considering
this season.
how off her rocker she has been, she came off really well in this reunion. She almost let a few things Teresa say wrinkle her, but otherwise not so much.
Would never wrinkle her because she wears too much Botox. Sorry.
Yes, but I think that everything Teresa and Melissa tried to throw at her, she had a good response, a good sane response, and it's sort of with I feel like with Teresa, because she's so tell me if this makes sense, unself-aware.
Yes, she's no capacity for self-examination. Correct.
That when she throws something out at someone and the person goes back at her and says, well, you do the same thing, or this, you don't discipline your daughter for doing XYZ, she has no retort. Mm-hmm. Because she just doesn't understand the concept that, like, two people can do things wrong, and one of those people is you. Like, I just don't know if she gets that.
She doesn't get it. That's what she is. And Siggy pretty much said that on the show when she was psychoanalyzing everybody. And another example, which is just, it was such a total Teresa move, that she comes out of prison, she's a changed person, her priorities are different, blah, blah, blah. And then somehow Lexus Gate is brought up.
You know who brought it up?
Who brought it up?
Melissa brought it up.
How did Melissa bring it up?
Melissa said that when she and Jacqueline were having a chat, that Jacqueline said made fun of Teresa having
getting
a
Lexus on the day she gets out of prison.
Correct.
A brand new Lexus.
Right.
And then Jacqueline throws back at Melissa, well, you were kind of talking about it too.
Right, you were laughing about it.
And then Andy says to her, as one does, well, you do realize that is not going to look good.
Right.
And
then Teresa says, I don't care what other people think.
And then he says, well, maybe like if I owed a lot of money, I would like buy a Ford. And she says to him, would you buy a Ford?
And
like,
he said
it's
yes.
like a junker tricycle or something. I mean, nothing wrong with the Ford.
No,
right,
I drive a Ford. I have a Ford C-Max hybrid, and I like it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then she tries to throw in the whole, well, when you lease a Lexus, it's really not that much. Like what?
Which may be true, but it's about the optics.
It is about the optics, but she doesn't care about the optics.
She does not,
because she doesn't understand the optics.
No, she does care about the optics. The optics she cares about is having people believe that everything is fine, everything is great, and she's got money, when everybody knows that is not the case, or at least it's not the case yet.
Right. Everything is not fine. So that's what we took away from Reunion Part 1.
Part 1.
They'll be back. And next week, Vicki will chat with me about The Real Housewives of Atlanta, which I asked her to watch so she could understand why other Real Housewives franchises are more fun and dramatic.
So far, I've only watched the first 15-20 minutes, and I did think it was more fun, and there was better real estate porn.
Absolutely.
Which I'm all into.
Between Moore Manor and Moore Manor and Chateau Charest, which I will explain to you on next week's episode. One other thing we have to talk about before we get to an interview that we have with the documentarians of The Killing Season, a new show that's premiering on A&E on Saturday. We talked to them about the Long Island serial killer and some unsolved murders in Atlantic City. It's really fascinating, so stay tuned for that. But before we get there, we have to quickly dive into Westworld.
Well, of course, there were a lot of really exciting things that happened, but for me, who is a huge fan of the 1973 Michael Crichton movie, the most, like, oh my God moment came when Bernard goes down to a sub basement to figure out who are these hosts that they have no record of in a certain part of the park that nobody goes to. So he goes down into this basement, and he's flashing his flashlight around because they don't have electricity down there anymore?
Yeah, flashing lights only.
Yes, and he pans over and you see like 1 second of basically the Yul Brynner character, the man in black, the gunslinger, who is the one who went haywire in the original movie and started killing all the all the human beings in the park, which is sort of the inverse of what is sort of happening on this show, where in the original movie, the hosts were basically the bad guys, the villains. Bad circuitry, bad wiring, they gained consciousness, whatever. They started killing everybody.
We don't know that that's not where this is going.
We don't know that's not where they're going.
Okay.
But the humans weren't as, portrayed in as bad a light as they are in the TV series.
Got it.
And so I'm like, oh my God, Yul Brynner. I'm like, so I was trying to think, is this just an Easter egg? Like, hey, folks, did you see that one?
Mm-hmm.
Or, are we going to see somebody playing,
Well, the writers and creators of the show spoke to EW, and it was just an Easter egg.
Oh, you already answered my question.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I love you. I love that Easter egg. That was awesome.
Vicki is all in.
That was awesome.
So yeah, what I took away from this episode, so there's this, so we, what's her name? Elsie discovers that one of the hosts is being monitored, or like data is being uploaded
They're transferring
somewhere.
Data to a satellite. They're getting it out of the park.
Correct. And we find out that it is, what's her name? Danish lady?
The Danish lady who is having an affair with Bernard.
Correct. That she's the one doing it. So Elsie.
Oh my God, we're terrible. We are the worst TV podcasters ever.
I really need a flowchart. Elsie decides, and what I thought was like one of the most ridiculous
Don't go
things
down
ever.
into the basement.
She's like, I think it's coming from a computer in this abandoned theater that no one's been to in years. Let me go down there by myself to check it out. Like, that is really how that entire sequence read to me.
Yes.
She goes down there, she checks it out. It's dark and creepy as hell, and you're like, all right, I'm just waiting for something to jump out of the shadows, and guess what happens at the end? Something jumps out of the shadows
and grabs Elsie.
And grabs her, and maybe it's Arnold.
Maybe it's
We
Arnold.
don't know
We have
where
no
the heck
idea.
Arnold is.
We have no idea.
We don't know what's happening with him.
We know what Arnold was busy doing for quite some time before he, quote-unquote, died, committed suicide, which is that he was creating Robert Ford, Dr. Ford's childhood world, but a little bit better. In an unused part of the park, there is this beautiful little, like, English cottage where his father, his mother, and his brother...
Or is that him?
I think it's him. He's a sibling. Yeah. So the young version of this guy, this little boy who's been wandering around the park,
is him.
Olden times,
which, by the way,
is him.
I said that weeks ago.
Yeah.
Well.
So did you? In like 37% of the internet.
Oh, please! When I first brought it up to you, you said no. That wasn't him.
I did not.
I
we
think
have to
you
go
did.
back now.
I think we got to rewind.
Okay.
That could have been an off-mic conversation, but I do recall bringing that up a few weeks ago because they were dressed in similar outfits.
Yes, it was very interesting. I don't know where or why this is happening, but it's still very intriguing.
Can we just, for 1 second before we get to our interview, talk about Tandy Newton's character?
Oh, the best character on the show. Maeve.
So why are they listening to her? Those two guys don't have to do what she says, but they do it anyway. Like, can't they just power her down?
Well, she apparently is resistant to being powered down.
Okay.
She has ways of getting around that. Why they can't just call in, like, the random Hemsworth brother and say, "Can you do something about this, please?"
Wait, there's a Hemsworth on this show?
Yes.
You are effing kidding me.
No, I'm not. It's the security guard with the blonde hair. Stubbs, I think his name is.
No.
Yes.
Which Hemsworth?
Absolutely. The unknown Hemsworth brother. I googled
the
it.
third one.
The third one.
Not Liam.
Yes. Not Liam.
Not Chris.
The other one. The other one.
There is a Hemsworth on this show.
Yes. There's a Hemsworth on the show.
Now that might be the most shocking thing that
Really?
What?
There's a Hemsworth on the show. Anyway,
stunned into silence.
Yeah, I mean, I think Felix is very intrigued by the whole thing. The guy with the beard who gets the scalpel to his neck, I'm not really sure why he's still on board.
Like, they had the computer. They could have changed all of her attributes to, like, 0. And they're like, nah, we're just going to dial these all up, whatever she says.
Yeah, I did think the moment where they bring up her intelligence, you kind of see it, like, flow through her spine.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, boys, we're going to have some fun.
But
it was the whole sequence where she is being taken through the facility. Through the facility, and this is behavioral, this is training, and you see the back. Right. It was such a smart way to do it too.
And it was so beautiful. So
smart.
Everything about it, the music. It was just wonderful. I said to Vicki that they probably spend millions of dollars on that elevator scene.
Mm-hmm.
Escalator scene. I would watch that episode again just for that scene.
I did watch it again.
One other thing that I want to say, I think you and I were talking offline about how they get into the park. Did you see now they have like these turns? They have these turnstile things. Did you not notice them?
I didn't exactly know it's a turnstile. I mean, it seems like they must have some sort of like subway contraption under the park with stops, and you get off and you go in the elevator and it lifts, and you see the turf being lifted with it, and you get out and the turf goes back down again.
No, I didn't see the turf go back down. I just saw like the revolving door.
Again,
whatever,
I'm
but that's how they get in.
You. I'm sorry. So it's really hard for me to talk about this.
Well, so far you haven't spoiled anything, so it's okay. So now we're going to get into our interview with Joshua Zeman and Rachel Mills, the documentarians behind The Killing Season. We are here with Joshua Zeman and Rachel Mills, two documentarians who have worked on this new series on A&E called The Killing Season, which premieres Saturday at 9 p.m. Joshua and Rachel, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
I was really interested in this case, obviously, because we're from New Jersey. The Atlantic City murders were really huge. We're in the New York area. What is it about these, sex worker, body dump cases that interested you?
Originally it was first the case in Long Island, which was all, again, sex workers who had all been killed. It had been unsolved. And what was very interesting was, we looked and spent literally, years kind of looking at that case. And every now and then a police officer, a journalist, a web sleuther, they would talk about these cases, these murders in Atlantic City, the eastbound strangler murders. And, you got to go where the story takes you. And we really started to go down a rabbit hole, and we started to look at the connections between the Lisk murders and the murders of the eastbound strangler. I mean, you had, they were all sex worker murders, and there were a lot of other very eerie similarities that made us think that those could be connected.
Well, I was also wondering, how long have you been working on this? Because there's been such an explosion of long-form true crime storytelling after Serial and Making a Murderer. Were you sort of looking for a case to crack, or you had already this native interest in the Gilgo Beach cases?
Well, actually, looking at the Gilgo Beach case is what we first concentrated on. We were going to do a feature documentary, actually, on the Gilgo investigation. And, once we discovered the AC case that they're in, led us to Daytona, and then we branched out to other places in the States, we decided, it would be a disservice to the story and stories to just concentrate on one case. So that's why we started looking into all these cases of sex worker murders.
Well,
and I think at the
go
time...
on, Josh.
Oh, and I also think at the time, we didn't know if we could tell this story in a long form. But by that time, Serial was coming out and Making of a Murderer, and I think suddenly the doors opened for us to look at this case and to look at all the underpinnings of why it happened in such a more robust and organic fashion. So, thank God there was this explosion in long-form storytelling that allowed us, to apply it to this case.
Well, actually, I'm sure you know that People Magazine Investigates and Investigation Discovery sort of beat you to it a little bit with their own 2-hour episode on the Long Island serial killer on Monday night. Did you watch it?
We did. We are actually on a plane coming to LA, but we haven't seen it yet.
They do recreations of various scenes, and they use actors and actresses, which I always think is a little weird to watch, which you didn't do. Any thought? Did you ever give a thought about doing reenactments like that?
No. Yeah,
it's cheating.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. That's not what we do. We don't do reenactments. In a lot of ways, I think it's kind of cheating. And, and I think, unfortunately, it kind of takes away from, the horrific truth of what is going on. We were doing this case for 4 years, and suddenly, last year we heard that People Magazine was kind of jumping on and wanted to do the same thing. And that's okay, because I think we knew that they were going to tell the story in, unfortunately, a much more sensationalized way. what I find unfortunate is that we spend a lot of time in the documentary series trying to educate people about why these cases don't get solved. And one of the reasons these cases don't get solved is because we sensationalize them so much that we kind of tend to keep calling them prostitutes or hookers rather than understanding that they're sex workers, and rather than understanding that, you know, no little girl ever grows up wanting to be a sex worker, and that there's a whole bunch of society issues that kind of cause these crimes to happen other than the killer themselves. So I think what I find frustrating is trying to kind of bring the level of conversation up to understanding the real truth of why these cases happening. And unfortunately, you know, you have these more sensationalistic things with, you know, magazine shows with like recrees that end up kind of continuing to put forth the same false narratives. You know, what we've learned is that audiences, you know, watching The Jinx, watching Making a Murder, they're interested in the deeper truths. They're interested in understanding the nuances of true crime. And so that's what we try to show. And I think we just found it very frustrating when People magazine kind of comes in and just shows a recreation of a body being thrown and things like that. It's kind of sad, you know.
So you were more using the genre to show how many sex workers disappear each year and how and why their cases fall through the cracks, as opposed to you really thought you were going to find the killer.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that Josh and I were very cognizant of is that, you know, we can't say that we're going to solve these murders necessarily. Now, who knows what's going to happen after the show? But what we really wanted to do was, you know, one, give a face to these victims, two, really immerse ourselves in these cases and figure out why they weren't getting solved, and possibly say who we didn't think was responsible for these murders. And then, you know, we worked with websleuth.com in, you know, in the Long Island case, there's still 5 unidentified bodies, and that's pretty big. So there are things that can be uncovered in these cases, such as identifying a body, that could definitely lead to solving these cases. But it's the small things, the small clues that we're hoping to reveal, if not in the series, soon after, by, you know, the public, really.
So you said one of the things that you aimed to do was to show who didn't commit these murders, but in order to do so, you sort of have to bring up those names of suspects or people who maybe internet sleuths, I know you guys use web sleuths, who maybe they thought could have committed the crimes. Mm-hmm. Was there any trepidation about that, you know, not knowing whether or not these people were guilty and you know, putting their names out there and going to speak to their families and people that knew them?
Of course there was trepidation, but, you know, I think the point is that, you know, that's where the story takes you. And if you really want to go and, you know, kind of get to the heart of the matter, you have to do the investigation. But it really points back to a bigger problem, which is, you know, what we like to highlight in our series. Basically, after a number of different years, the law enforcement in Suffolk County stopped speaking to the press. And as a result, you know, you had a huge explosion of speculation. And this is not, you know, people talking down at the local diner, whispering. This is an unbelievable amount of speculation that, you know, gets exacerbated by the internet, because the internet is anonymous. And that's kind of what we wanted to highlight in this case. And when you don't have law enforcement that is in constant communication with the public, especially about a serial killer in their midst, you know, the public is going to create their own stories. It's going to create their own, you know, kind of legends about it. And I think that's what we wanted to do. We realized that the case was kind of spinning. And so we wanted to go in, we wanted to say who we didn't think, so that we can all concentrate on the real issues at hand and concentrate on the real issues of getting this case solved, kind of rather than rehashing the same old stories over and over again. And this wasn't just happen in Long Island. I think this is something that we saw happen in New Jersey as well. The Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office is notorious for being completely tight-lipped about their cases, to the point that we had families coming to us begging for information from the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office. Now, you can always say that that's a strategy that certain prosecutors use to kind of manage the press. And, of course, as you saw in the Long Island case and in the New Jersey case, the press could be ridiculous. They could take a lot of time away. But
you do know we work for NJ.com.
The Star Ledger.
And the Star Ledger.
No, of course. And look, we see it. Look what happened in Long Island. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, the press comes in, and when there's so much press, it takes away resources from the investigation. But I think in Long Island and Atlantic City, it went beyond that. It was a way for, I think, in Atlantic City, for them not to continue to talk about the fact that in a place that sells sanctioned sin, casinos and what have you, you don't want to keep talking about the fact that you have 4 dead sex workers. It's not good for business. It's not good for people coming to the casinos. And so I think that's another thing we like to look at. Why, how law enforcement manages these issues. And our role is the press. We're the press too. You guys are the press. We're the press. We all have a role in continuing to either correct the truth or, unfortunately, spin the same untruths. And that's something that we tried to do.
Well, you say you're spinning the untruths, but what I walked away from the first couple of episodes of the show, when you're raising people's names that like Joseph Foti or Peter Hackett, who you later say are dead ends, I was like, well, why did you raise them at all? Because if I was reporting the story as a crime reporter, if it came to a dead end, I wouldn't report it. It wouldn't go in the newspapers.
Yes,
I wouldn't want to contribute to that.
Yes, but here's the problem. That story is already in the ether. You can't undo the story. And so what you have to do is you have to talk about it and address it and show the people why it's not true. Because if you don't talk about it, then they believe that you missed the story. Then they believe that you didn't do your homework. And that's how you debase or demystify rather than just not address it. I mean, we're seeing the same ideas. That's how conspiracy theories work. Mm-hmm. And so you have to address them, and you have to provide the most credible narrative you can so that people say, I see your point. Maybe someone like Hackett isn't the guy. Or maybe I realize that Shannon isn't really the story here, and that Shannon takes away from the larger issue of 10 individuals who are found along Ocean Parkway, 5 of whom have not been identified. And if you want to really find out who the Long Island serial killer is, don't concentrate on Shannon. Concentrate on the 5 victims who we don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talked about the tight-lippedness of the law enforcement agencies. What do you think that they could be doing to help these cases along that they're not doing now?
I think law enforcement agencies...
Sorry. Continue.
No, please. I was just going to say that I think law enforcement agencies, they're in a tough position. Look, we don't want to throw them under the bus. They're overworked and underpaid. But, and serial murder cases are some of the hardest to solve. It's stranger upon stranger crime. But once, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4 starts going past, I really don't know what information is in the AC case. In Long Island, I know there's definitely some evidence that could be released. Josh talks about the 5 unidentified bodies. We know that one was an Asian male who was actually dressed in women's clothing. That's a very specific victim. We also know that clothing the Suffolk County Police Department has. If they were able to release a photo of that clothing, you could possibly identify that individual and therein create a narrative, create a timeline, and work back from there. So, there are things that police could do. I know it's hard for them, and I know that a lot of times they want to hold on to those holdbacks so there's not forced confessions later on. But, until police are able to have an ongoing dialogue with the public and be able to release a little bit more information, which, interestingly enough, I think Long Island is one of the cases that we looked at that could definitely be solved, because we do know there is evidence out there that clothing of Asian male, and in addition to that, there was a toddler and a mother. The toddler was wrapped in a blanket. Again, releasing a photo of that as a child. There's a family who is looking for that child, who knows that child is missing.
Just to add on what Rachel said, I think one of the issues is that, look, we're in the midst of a huge national conversation about the role of law enforcement and about transparency in law enforcement. And I think that same conversation applies to these cases as well. I think everybody's demanding a little bit more accountability and a little bit more transparency. And Long Island and Atlantic City, you have two cases where the press have been that the prosecutor's office have not been very transparent. Unfortunately, there's only been one real press conference about these murders that happened in Atlantic City. And so I understand they don't want to continue to bring up cases that they haven't solved. It doesn't look good. Yet at the same time, you have to put your ego aside and you have to think about the victims. You can't just put out a press release on the anniversary and say the case is still open. That's not good enough. And so what we're asking for is that these women, both in Long Island and Atlantic City and around the country, to not be forgotten. Because they're more than just sex workers. They were somebody's wife, somebody's child, somebody's mother, and they deserve justice just as much as anybody else.
Going to Atlantic City one more time, you made it there right before the Golden Key was torn down after Sandy. Did you know that? Were you racing against the clock? 'Cause it certainly made for some arresting visuals.
Yeah, that was pretty organic. Like a lot of other things we investigated in the series, we kind of just went where the story took us. We knew that for quite a while the Golden Key was supposed to be ripped down. And, of course, we were working at being able to film that. So we weren't really racing, against the clock for that, but it was great to be able to film that because really that is representative of, it's symbolic of seeing where these women, their final resting place, and seeing that place torn down is, I understand it's a public health situation. It's dilapidated, but that is no longer there is just a symbolic kind of thing that the case is no longer, in people's minds. You won't pass by there and see it and remember necessarily that, oh, wait a minute, that case is still unsolved. What happened with that case? Now you're just going to go by and see some asphalt with, weeds, which, in a way is kind of unfortunate.
So before we wrap up here, I read the book Lost Girls by Robert Kolker, and, there seems to be a lot of interest in the Lisk case. What pitch would you make to our listeners for the killing season? What makes it different? What are you guys going to show to us that you don't think anyone else has done so far?
It's interesting that you bring up Lost Girls because I thought Lost Girls was one of the absolute best true crime books I had read in the past 10 years. And so we approached Bob Kolker and we said, hey, listen, I love Lost Girls. The problem is it's too short. I want to know what's happened now. And so I think what Rachel and I tried to do is we kind of tried to pick up where Lost Girls left off. But what was great is we also tried to tonally do that as well. Lost Girls is more than just, your typical book about an unsolved serial killing. It gets into the victims. It brings a name to a face, and it explores why these women became victims and how, for example, the changing face in prostitution. And Kolker has been great in terms of helping us kind of continue on with that mission. And so I think what we do is we try and demystify a lot of the Hollywood tropes behind serial killing and show that it's a much more interesting situation. We try and get to the nitty-gritty. At the same time, we try and, get to really why this case hasn't been solved. And it's interesting, and it seems counterintuitive, but when you realize why this case hasn't been solved, you realize what it takes to solve it.
Great. Well, thank you, Joshua Zeman and Rachel Mills. The Killing Season premieres on Saturday, November 12th at 9 p.m. on A&E. I will certainly be watching, and I'm sure Vicki will be too.
Thanks, guys.
All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Remote Possibilities. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter @RemotePodcast, @E_meds, and at Vicki Hy, VICKIHY. Next week, we're going to talk about Luke Cage. Vicki and I finally finished the entire season. Vicki is going to pelt Real Housewives of Atlanta questions at me, and I'm very excited to answer those. We'll, of course, be back to discuss part 2 of the Real Housewives of New Jersey reunion, and we'll talk a little bit more about Westworld, because by then I may have caught up to where Vicki is.
And I have to say, the next episode it's got a doozy in it.
Does it? Oh, I can't wait. We're going to leave you with that cliffhanger. So until next week.